This is World War II Economics and Production, a video presentation by Mark Schwartz, as the first of 7 segments covering the entire American rearmament response to win World War II. It documents America's transition from economic stagnation during the Great Depression to that of World War II global superpower. Axis nations first made their bid for rearmament and conquest during the 1930s, with Nazi Germany specifically violating the Versailles Treaty. America responded in a much shorter time with far greater results, and we will explore how Roosevelt embraced a model of capitalism and investment that removed all restrictions and risks on business, in fact, maximizing profits for manufacturing war goods. As you read this presentation theme or thesis, remember that battles alone do not win wars unless nations can concentrate strategic power at the right place and time, usually for an extended duration. America combined good political and economic policies to stimulate the most efficient war production ever seen, and delivered enough war materials to outfit itself and allies like England, Russia, and France. Having resources and manpower was not an assurance to win, but American authorities followed the guidance of experienced military industrial planners who directed what to produce and economists who used statistical analysis that forecast how soon the intended production surge would enable large-scale offensives against Germany and Japan. World War II economics and production is a vast and very detailed topic, and the pictured series of 7 presentations will take us from the 1930s to war's end. They portray a mix of policy, plans, inspiration, hard work, and adaptation in politics, business, finance, manufacturing, and military planning. Leaders collaborated in an interdisciplinary cauldron that produced thousands of rifles, tanks, aircraft, ships, and consumable supplies. Today, we call this a whole-of-government solution because so many disparate federal elements united in making a complex process succeed by incentivizing the private sector. The common perception says America let World War II military preparations slide until just before Pearl Harbor. This is not entirely true, as military professionals updated the economic and production lessons from World War I in the 1930s and prepared a template for war production on a vast scale. Aircraft orders from Britain and France in 1939 to 1941 helped prime the manufacturing pump, but contingency plans, capitalist philosophy, and government absorbing nearly all financial risks enticed America's businessmen to enthusiastically support war production. A key point here, Roosevelt and his administration made a momentous change to earn the trust of private sector business leaders. They buried the New Deal philosophy and embraced capitalism and generous profits. Let's set the scene and summarize America's situation in the Great Depression, where our economy stagnated, shrank, and discouraged business confidence and initiative. The means to emerge from stagnation were present, but the private sector, business and finance, was in no mood to step forward and risk their remaining assets to stimulate economic growth in either peace or war, while the Axis nations used command economies and corrupt policies to secretly rearm. We still enjoyed ocean buffers to protect us until 1941. But as Stalin remarked, some nations could mass produce and risk machines rather than human lives to win in World War II. And America enjoyed that luxury to implement full production and fight the war with a tiny fraction of Russia's human losses. If you were in business or finance, would you risk scarce capital in this failing environment. Factories are shuttered, workers are dispersed. 1939 gross domestic product is far below that of 1929. But during the Depression, business managers fought back to make manufacturing more efficient. As America drew closer to entering the war, Detroit's automobile works could consistently machine parts to a tolerance of 1/100th of an inch, less than 2 millimeters. The Axis couldn't do this, where American industry made fully interchangeable parts that fit perfectly on assembly lines, fit as spare parts in field maintenance, and made American-built weapons far more reliable in combat than Axis goods. While America seemed to sleep through the Depression, the Axis nations attacked their neighbors. They had the luxury of knowing when, where, and how each of these conflicts would begin, and paced their rearmament accordingly. When American rearmament began in 1940 and 41, we were far behind the extent and pace of Axis efforts. But the scope, depth, and duration of World War II went far beyond Axis expectations, as wars often take on a life of their own. England didn't fall to Germany in 1941, and Hitler attacked Russia that summer. Japan couldn't extract itself from China, which became a huge drain on resources. This played into America's production surge, allowing enough time for the rearmament process to hit its stride. While the Axis powers sequentially overwhelmed their victims, low-level planning in America's political and military echelons linked mobilization and war plans with the industrial sector. Britain and France placed orders for warplanes in 1939 and 1941, which started cash flow through aircraft prime manufacturers and their subcontractors. At that same time, government funded the construction of major armaments plants, and contractors took over the facilities with guaranteed contracts to keep the factory fully engaged. The government removed any remaining private sector hesitation by absorbing the financial risks for mass production and guaranteed profits in each contract. If you doubt that maximizing economics and manufacturing are important, look at Allied versus Axis production of aircraft and tanks during the mid-years of World War II. America, Britain, Russia grossly outproduced the Axis nations in key weapon systems. And throughout the series of presentations, we will reveal the secrets of America's economists and how they structured the manufacturing surge to do this. It was a process of inspiration, exploiting knowledge, and maximizing human and material resources in a process that authoritarian systems could never embrace. America placed wage and price controls on goods and salaries during the war, but trust in capitalism directed that government place resources with private business people, trusting them to innovate and assume responsibility to deliver as promised. Nazi Germany began its Depression recovery in 1933, the year that Hitler assumed power. As shown in the graphic, GNP increased almost immediately as the command economy began to secretly rearm and build projects like the Autobahn. Mass unemployment disappeared in a way America couldn't duplicate, but Nazi economic policies were both corrupt and illegal, all steps to an imminent war. We will look at specific German policies in the upcoming slides, but ask yourself if the democracies would have been justified to do the same things. Also ask if American public opinion would have supported rearmament at this time, which suggested an entry into the war with isolationist and anti-war sentiment so prevalent in 1939 through 1941. Japan started aggressive expansion before Germany and Italy, but also structured her economy for war during the Depression. Her GDP grew steadily during that period, but was she tied too deeply to war production? In 1931, nearly one-third of her GDP supported war production, and by 1936, 47% of it supported war. How much more war production could her budget sustain, especially as the scope of her expansion increased and when Japan finally brought America into the war? Admiral Yamamoto counseled against war with America, saying that he could win battles for 6 months to a year, but would make no promises after that. 1 year after Pearl Harbor marks the point that our production surge delivered tangible results. And here is bibliography and citations.